Chairman, thank you very much. Thank you for the panel for being here. I recognize that it's probably a circumstance in which others have a stronger voice in the topic that we're about, and I'm pleased to have students and their parents here today, student athletes, to give us their perspective. I was started down a different path, but then Senator Blumenthal walked in, and it caused me to turn to you, Ms. Curitan. I'm troubled by your testimony. Senator Blumenthal and I chaired and ranking members of a subcommittee in the past that dealt with sexual assault and abuse with the United States Olympics. And you mention in your testimony, you describe a failure to act in cases of sexual assault, and that you've had conversations about specific cases that were reported but no action was taken. And then Ms. Chenault, in response to the chairwoman's question, was talking about answering the question about who do you go to and lack of trust. I mean, what strikes me here is that what we heard from U.S. Olympians was very similar to what you're describing today. One, we don't know who to report to, we don't trust anybody. We have each other, is what appeared to me with U.S. athletes, Olympic athletes. Seemingly that would be true for you, but beyond that, there's no one to talk to. And then secondly, sexual assault is or can occur and isn't being reported, and if reported, nothing is being done. I just would, any or all of you, but Ms. Curitan, maybe we'll start with you. Is there something that it would be helpful for me and the committee to know about that circumstance? When what I saw at Michigan State and others in regard to the Olympics is shocking to me. I thought it's terrible to have one victim. What I could never understand was why there was more than one. Where are the adults, if that's the right word, who respond to this circumstance? And if that's something that we ought to know about, I'd like to know about it.
Yeah, thank you. I think that a bigger part of the problem is that we're underestimating the interests of these coaches in winning games, and we're underestimating the interests of the athletic department in protecting their image publicly. Athletes are told to report things, like she already mentioned, in-house, but when it comes down to that, there's still the interest that wins out of winning games, keeping your job, maintaining the image of the organization that is put over the interest of student-athlete health and well-being. On top of that, like has already been discussed, oftentimes we don't know who to report to, or we report it to an individual and then we're told it's being handled, and then come to find out later on it never got to the Title IX coordinator, or we don't even know who our Title IX coordinator is. So I think there's a lot of gaps in the system in that sense, and I think the experience with the U.S. Olympic team mirrors that of a lot of student athletes, of just feeling uncertain of who to talk to, who you can trust. It may even come down to being with teammates. You don't know if you can trust them either, if they're after your spot, and who you can have a conversation with. In the instances and discussions that I had, it was a case of assault between teammates, so the coach was even less likely probably to act in that scenario. In other instances where it may be an act committed by an athlete in the community, there's little conversation about how that's being handled properly. So like I said, once again, I think it's a lack of athletes being made aware of what their rights are and who to go to. And I think at times that can be a gap, but I think sometimes that's intentional too.
If you experienced or witnessed or were told about a sexual assault, would you have been told, or are there a policy in place as to who it should be reported to?
Yes, there is a policy in place. In my experience, though, a lot of student athletes go to whoever they feel most comfortable with in the department first, but sometimes that doesn't necessarily work to their advantage. Just like I said before, the interests of the organization are oftentimes at stake.
Senator Blumenthal, and he may agree with me in this, it's very similar to what we heard in our investigation of the Olympic circumstance. Does anybody else have any comments that I should hear about this, Mr. McNair?
So one of the main things, Senator Moran, Senator Blumenthal as well, as a parent, let's not forget these are still children, and these are still kids. So again, no matter how tall they are, at the end of the day, my son was 6'5", 300 pounds, and he wore a size 16 shoe, but he was still 19. So again, you know, one of the things in Maryland that we enact, a bill was passed last year, I believe in 2019, and it's called the Jordan McNair Act. And what that does is, because of our situation or our scenario at the University of Maryland at that particular time, you have a hotline that student athletes can call, and they can call without fear of retribution in the fact of a situation like this. So maybe that should be something that we should implement in this level of legislation that you can, without any, you can call if you feel uncomfortable or something that may happen that you don't know who to report to. But again, you can call this number without fear of retribution, without a coach telling you, you know, don't bite the hand that feeds you, and all of the mind games that the coaching staff plays on our student athletes. But at the end of the day, let's not forget these are young people, and a lot of times when these things happen to them, this is basically, unfortunately, a lot of times their first real reality that life just isn't, the world isn't a pretty place. And a lot of times when this initially happens, who do they report this to? So they usually turn on each other. And as parents, I think we take the onus as well, because we'll ask. I never thought to ask Jordan about this thing in particular. You ask questions, how was school or how was practice? You'll get a one-line answer. So if you're not asking a definitive questioning by saying, do you feel uncomfortable? Is somebody making you feel uncomfortable? Is it something that is going on that you feel uncomfortable about that you should share? So if we're not asking these questions, you know, we'll get this type of result.
Thank you for the reminder of the value of parenting.
Yep, thank you.
Chairwoman, thank you.
I want